bene, lei pianeggiare. Allora, lei
I think every single person on this planet needs to be educated and re-educated about climate change. We are dedicated as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to embrace this education issue.
We can look into the eyes of our children, our grandchildren, and we can finally say, tell them that we have joined hands to bequeath a more habitable world.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
State Congress voted to ban abortion. Alternate universe located.
Global temperatures rise.
The effects on social media on Generation Z.
To avoid catastrophe, rising sea levels, and dying coral reefs, the epicenter of a global pandemic.
No exception for rape or incest.
What we're doing today and also bringing out some facts and figures on things that have been announced. But we're going to have a slightly different start today because we've got a very special guest. If you could say who you are and where you're from.
Hello, everybody. Great pleasure to be here, Nick, with both of you. Well, I'm Adalberto Maluf, Vice Minister of Environment and Climate Change here from the Ministry of Environment in Brazil, and also the co-chair of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, CCAC.
Yeah, hosted by UNEP, the UN Environment Programme, and very much focused on super pollutants. You know, we did a lot of attention on super pollutants in Baku at the last climate conference. Methane as well, of course. Tell us a little bit what's happening with the methane story, Adalberto.
Well, this COP is all about implementation. You know, we already made agreements, all the countries on the global stocktake in Dubai. So we decided to select these 30 areas in which we would accelerate implementation. Methane and non-CO2 is one of them. During the summit of the leaders, where the presidents met 1 week ago, we had on the parallel methane summit between Brazil, UK, China, and also many other partners, where we heard, you know, the actions that China has been doing in Brazil, UK. We did some announcements of new investments, like the launch of the accelerator for methane into the countries, 150 million to support 30 countries to accelerate the action they are doing on methane. And now here on the official negotiation, we are trying to find a way so that we can get throughout the GST dialogue, which will be this environment where we would accelerate the action. And as you might all have heard, President Lula, in his initial speech, told very clear message about the importance of us having a roadmap for phasing off fossil fuel. So we need to understand how this roadmap will be. You know, when it would happen, where the funding will come from. So methane is one of the areas from this roadmap of phasing out fossil fuel. We are also thinking ways that throughout the fair transition agenda, we can incorporate some of the methane reduction because unfortunately, as soon as we got all the NDCs, we realized that there's a huge emission gap. We are still far away from the 1.5 roadmap we need to be. So both of the adaptation and the mitigation agenda, the super pollutants, especially methane, which already accounts for 30% of our increase of temperature, we need to speed up the action that is already happening. So Brazilian COP presidency have set this as a top priority. We're going to have the Global Methane Pledge Ministerial early next week, in which we hope to have a lot of new announcements, new commitments from the countries there. And together, we will follow up from here to COP31 in a plan, an action plan on how we can accelerate these technologies, proven technologies on the oil and gas, on agriculture, on the waste, that are already there. We've seen the results. In the case of Brazil, we were able to have here, for example, the signature between 13 mayors announcing the new funding that our climate fund gave to them to do methane capture system in the landfills. Some of the largest landfills of Brazil, they will capture methane. We also launched initiatives on a plan to reduce and recycle organic waste, to reduce food loss. Waste and food loss together can account for around 10% of the emissions. And it's all about food security, it's about social and economical development. So methane is in the top of the agenda. Hopefully the ministerial on the Global Methane Pledge next week will set this course in which many different countries are saying very loudly that methane should be one of the priorities, our lowest hanging fruit, so that we can win time to get on the CO2 and the most challenging things that we know they're going to come. So we hope that COP30 in Brazil, Belém, will be remembered as the one that has set methane in the core of the action plan, especially on the implementation agenda.
That's really interesting. And those 13 cities in Brazil, is Belém one of them? You mentioned 13 cities in Brazil with waste management of methane. Is the big cities we know, like Rio and Belém, and we know Belém now, Sao Paulo, yeah.
Yeah, no, they're all the big cities of Brazil. So Rio, Salvador, Fortaleza, São Paulo has 2 big landfills, which will be part of this process. Belém, we just inaugurated at the beginning of a COP, the first composting facility of the city. It was a project that we helped, funded by the Global Methane Hub and some partners. So all the organic waste from COP30 has been composting, and then the composting is used for urban agriculture projects here in Belém. So Belém has been also leading the way in this agenda, and hopefully not only the COP itself will have a better footprint regarding the emissions that it would keep from organic, but also we will set this new stage in which the Climate Fund of Brazil is available to finance this project. We also approved a bill now called the Fuel of the Future, which requires 1% blend of biomethane into the natural gas grid, starting in 2027, going 1% per year until 10% in 2037. So with that, we created a demand. We also have policies to increase, biofuel, biodiesel, sustainable diesel for aviation. So these policies, because they require the demand, are making it more economically viable. The technologies that we already know are approved on the waste methane capture, not only on urban waste, but also on agriculture waste. And we believe that with this, we can close the gap for more circularity into the methane agenda.
Absolutely super. And it's so nice to hear these positive developments in your country.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, because there's so much blah-de-blah at COPs. I'm sorry to say blah-de-blah, but there's a lot of talk. People have to talk. But here's some practical examples of what you're doing in your own country with the methane and, in a sense, applying the emergency brake on climate change to an extent in your own country too, Adalberto. So that's really good. I think we have to let you go now because you have to represent the Environment Minister, Marina Silva, at an event downtown in Belém in the historic area. So you are allowed to go. We don't like doing that with you, Adalberto. We'd like to have you here longer, but you must do it. So thank you very much indeed. Cheers. Very nice.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Bye.
So, Nick.
I think every single person on this planet needs to be educated and re-educated about climate change. We are dedicated as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to embrace this education issue.
We can look into the eyes of our children, our grandchildren, and we can finally say, tell them that we have joined hands to bequeath a more habitable world.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
State Congress voted to ban abortion. Alternate universe located.
Global temperatures rise.
The effects on social media on Generation Z.
To avoid catastrophe, rising sea levels, and dying coral reefs, the epicenter of a global pandemic.
No exception for rape or incest.
So this is the last day of the first week of the COP, here from the Climate Hub studio. We don't have time at the COP30 in Berlin. And Nick, there's been so much anticipation of this COP since it's the 10th year anniversary of Paris. And do you think that might be this might turn out to be a very significant COP? What do you see?
Well, I mean, it's obviously very different to the conditions in Paris. I think we heard that from Sandrine Dixon de Clèves the other day. Paris was about getting an agreement of all nations to act together on climate change. Now, this is about implementing what Paris asked us to do. Baby steps in the run-up to Brazil. But if the enthusiasm of Adalberto from the ministry, who was with us just a few minutes ago, is anything to go by, maybe we will have a moment where we can say, right, this is really something to celebrate, unlike maybe the slightly, minor celebrations of the last 10 years since Paris.
So, Nick, could you tell us a bit about what you picked up so far from some news?
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky. Our friends at Mission 2025 are sending us updates every morning, and you can see those on our website, wedon'thavetime.org. But there's one that took my eye this morning, which is, well, look, when you go to COPs, you often get all these announcements, and then some of them are a bit hot air, right, because nothing really happens. But in Dubai 2 years ago, utilities from around the world, like Hitachi Energy and Husk in Africa and Ingrid in the Nordics, these are all grids, E.ON, many others, formed the Utilities for Net Zero initiative. And yesterday they announced they had raised $148 billion for more renewable energy, improvements on electric grids and storage, and that this big network of utilities reckon they'll be able to invest about $1 trillion into things like improving the grids by 2020, which is good news. And these are big global companies and regional companies. They're pressing forward. They're not retreating backwards, as some people think, on climate action. They are really stepping up their game.
One would think 10 years after Paris that, well, science would be in the driver's seat, right? But that's not really the case, and that's why we try to support science as much as we can. But because the political leadership, there has been a backlash, right?
Yeah, on science, yeah, for sure. I mean, we know that populist governments out there have been doing this, and we don't have time of a mission of amplifying and supporting science and researchers this year, and we're proud to have brought that mission successfully to COP30. And these caps we're wearing, they're not here to buy, they're here as a symbol of what we want to do. And if you want one of these caps, you have to donate to the cause of more advocacy for science.
And it's easy. You just go to our webpage and you You search for Make Science Great Again, and you can donate to the campaign. And you can also spread the Amplify the Bucket Challenge that we are doing.
Oh, yeah.
So let's watch the video on the Bucket Challenge.
¿A quién le podemos dar el gorro?
But why do we need to make science great again? If we don't support science, if we don't fund science, we are losing the very key rock or basement from our society. We don't want to do that. Make science great again.
Why things are the way they are, and the best way to do that is through science. It's a way to ask questions, to test ourselves, to think again, and to be able to talk about things in a cool, curious way with other people.
If I can find a leader who is brave enough to wear the cap, I'm happy to give it to that person.
Great, so we're back again. Normally at this point in the show, we don't have time CEO Ingmar Rentzhog come out and give us a presentation on our Make Science Great Again campaign. But this is only one of our campaigns. Another campaign close to our heart is the Buy More Time campaign. Ingmar, what's that all about?
It's in the name. We don't have time. We don't have time to wait. We need to address and speed up all the solution for the climate crisis. And that's happening, but it's going too slow. And Buy More Time is a campaign that we launched last year at COP29. And it's actually more needed now than then. And it's about to focus on the solution we have at hand to actually cool the planet by decreasing super pollutants, the gases that are so potent that it's heating the planet, but they're very short-lived. So if we stop emitting them, we can cool the planet with up to 0.5 degrees. So we have a short film here that explains this, I believe. This is the climate crisis today. We're kind of leaning backwards. And the more emission we put up there, the more we're leaning it. But we can still do this, right? The problem, if we pass 1.5 degree, and we're very near, we're kind of there, but if we stay there and we just keep going up, there's a big, big risk of hitting a tipping point. And when we hit a tipping point, this share will be very, very hard to put back up. So this is what we must avoid for the climate. And we have a cure for this. The only thing we need in order to make it is more time. We need to buy more time. And now we feel the resistance from the politicians. But when we're up here, they will not resist the green transition because the green transition are the majority. So the policy will change when the technology changes, but we need more time. So how can we get more time? The problem with carbon dioxide, when we emit it, it will go up. And it will stay up there for up to 1,000 years. Maybe we can kind of try to remove it, but it looks kind of hard to do it, very expensive. Methane is another greenhouse gas. It's a very common greenhouse gas. It's the second biggest contributor to global warming. And there's a big difference between methane and carbon dioxide. When we release this, it comes down again. On average, 12 years. It's a big difference between 1,000 years, 12 years. So the solution here is that we need to stop emit methane. And if we do that, we can actually reverse global warming with up to 0.5 degrees. that is the time we need to do everything else, because we still need to stop the carbon dioxide. So this is great news. And where does this methane come from? This is one of the sources. Bananas. Waste, food waste. 20% of methane emission comes from waste. But guess what? When I arrived here this morning, I took the bus, and the bus in Sweden, in Stockholm, are powered with bioenergy. We don't emit hardly any methane from waste. So other countries can do the same. 45% from methane comes from the fossil fuel industry. And this is a lot of emission that is really easy to fix. It's just fix the pipe. Cows are burping 4 times every 5 minutes. Agriculture adds up to 40% of the methane emissions. Many companies working on this, where you have a food additive, and you give that to the cows, and they burp up to 80% less. So what do we need? We need to look at the fridge. All the fridges we had when I was a kid were powered by a dangerous gas. And when that was released up in the air, it was destroying the ozone layer. If we hadn't fixed it, we will not be able to walk outside today and show naked skin. But we're not doing that, because the industry, the manufacturers of the fridges, the chemical companies, and bold world leaders met in Montreal, where they decided to ban freons, phase it out, put the funding behind it, and today we have perfectly fresh food and we don't use freon anymore. Isn't it great? It saved humanity once, so we can do it twice. And there is one more thing. This year in Mars, there was a new satellite launched that is called the Methane satellite. And it will measure open data where we have emission from methane, leakage, and we will know exactly where we need to fix the problem. We don't have that for any other climate gases, but we have it for methane. So a legal system, some funding, and the data is everything we need. And this is what Buy More Time is all about. We can do this.
Great. So, Ingmar, this campaign was launched last year at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. What has happened since then, briefly?
I mean, we had a lot of traction in the world for methane reduction in Azerbaijan. There was one part of the outcome of the COP29 meeting. Both US, European Union and China were pushing for it. There was a lot of geopolitical sunshine, actually, because it's easier to get rid of methane than carbon dioxide, because methane is just a byproduct. And we have the tech to really get rid of it. But what has happened since when? United States has become a roof state going anti-science. So they are actually using their leverage and their bullying to push for European Union to give up European Union's methane policy. So instead of being on the right side of history, US has kind of gone a little bit bananas for methane. And I understand that they want to drill more oil, but I think why don't they want to cool the planet with methane at least is really strange. So what we have done on We Don't Have Time is taking this campaign further. So we are now sourcing and offering methane avoidance credits. So companies and organizations that wants to cool the planet, they don't need to wait for the policymakers to do the right thing. They can do the right thing here and now. And methane reduction, it's so much more efficient and cheaper compared to carbon removal. And it's the same thing. We remove the gas that are heating the planet so we can cool the planet. But this is so much more efficient. But we haven't given up on the advocacy, because I mean, come on, not even the big companies like Microsoft will be able to pay as much needed to cool the planet by themselves. We really need a regulation like the Montreal Protocol. And the only way to get that happening is by advocating in UN to get it happen. We don't need the US on board, we have many other countries. So half of the money in our methane avoidance credits are going to advocacy like we're doing here right now.
Okay, good. Ingmar, just stay with us and stay for the panel. Let's move on. We're now going to dive a little bit deeper into the challenges and opportunities when it comes to methane and perhaps other short-lived climate pollutants or super pollutants. It's my great pleasure to welcome the following great guests into the studio. That's Martina Otto.
Hi, Nick.
Hello. Head of the Secretariat of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, which is hosted by the UN Environment Programme. We had Adalberto Maluf, the National Secretary of Urban Environment and Environmental Quality in the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change in Brazil, on earlier because he had to rush away. But we are lucky to be joined by the magic of Zoom from Rome in Italy with Giulia Farini, who is the OGMP 2.0 manager. You might have to explain that, Giulia, at the UN Environment Programme's International Methane Emissions Observatory. So welcome, everybody. Giulia, I'm going to come with you first. So the UN Environment Programme's International Methane Emissions Observatory just released its annual report. Can you tell us some of the headline findings from this report?
Absolutely. Hi, Nick. Hi, Martina. So I'm Giulia Ferini. I work for the International Methane Emissions Observatory hosted by UNEP. And I'm going to talk today about science and about buying time. So two of the topics that you were covering earlier. So what our report is saying is that we have the data and we have the tools to reduce methane emissions. Our goal is simple, just to explain briefly what the International Methane Emission Observatory, or IMEO, is to ensure that those with the power to act have the data and insight to drive rapid change. We can absolutely reduce methane emissions. We know how to do that. We have the tools, we have the technologies, and increasingly we have the data. And this is what our report is saying. And this is critical because as we mark the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, and as we are midpoint into the Global Methane Pledge, it is important to say to the world that there is a really easy way here to buy time. So what we're doing is unprecedented. We're integrating empirical data from different sources, satellites, reporting to the oil and gas companies, reporting to the Oil and Gas Methane Partnership 2.0, that's what OGMP stands for, and empirical data from scientific studies. So what are we finding in the annual report is that there is a growing use of all this data that we're putting out in the hands of those who can actually reduce emissions. Through our satellite program Mars, we have mapped some of the absolute biggest emission sources of methane detected by satellites globally. And these sources span all sectors and nearly 20 countries, so showing how global the methane problem is. In the oil and gas sector, we've identified more than 15,000 methane plumes, sent over 4,000 alerts in more than 30 countries, and we've documented 25 mitigation case studies. The response rate to these alerts has jumped from 1% to 12% in a year, so good sign. Countries and companies are responding to these alerts. Of course, this is absolutely not enough. So the data is there. The satellite data that we're bringing together and putting out in the public domain is helping countries and companies pinpoint where the biggest opportunities for mitigation are, but we need more companies and more countries to respond to these alerts. Another message from our report is that the fastest and most cost-effective methane cuts must come from the fossil fuel sector. We know that's where the highest mitigation potential exists. And also because satellites by themselves alone, they only see the tip of the iceberg and they only see the biggest source. But we know that the majority of emissions comes from smaller diffuse sources. And this is why something like UNEP's Oil and Gas Methane Partnership is so crucial. It is helping move the industry from estimates to actual measurements that are driving emissions reductions. Because when companies measure, they know where the emissions are and they reduce these emissions. So again, the good news here is that over 150 companies joined OGMP. This represents 42% of global oil and gas production. And just to illustrate why it's so important to shift from estimates to measurement, I'll give you one example from one of our members in Ukraine that detected through measurements that their biggest emission was venting during a manual process. Despite wartime challenges, they automated the process and they cut emissions by half. And that means more gas in the pipe and out of the atmosphere. So again, the tools exist and the results make business sense. And now is a question of having the rest of the industry following.
Thank you. Julia, thank you very much indeed for that analysis of the new report. I wanted to hear about the Ukraine example because it's so fascinating. A country in a really tough time, being hit by missiles almost daily, can actually halve its methane losses, as it were, from its pipes or wherever the flare, or wherever the leaks are coming from, can halve them, right? Probably because they need that energy so badly to keep going that they prioritized it. But it just shows what you can do if you want to do it. Is that right, do you think?
Absolutely. And this is why companies are in the Oil and Gas Methane Partnership. This is why companies are measuring and reducing their emissions, because it does make business sense for them. A methane-free asset is a safer asset. It's a better performing asset. It's an asset where methane is not escaping out of the atmosphere, but is just kept in the pipe and can be reutilized and sold, and can, in some countries, methane is used to power electricity. So this is just something that makes so much sense that, you know, it's what is surprising is that not everyone is doing it, but we're gonna get there.
Julia, just stay with us because we'll come back. We have about, because Adalberto was on earlier because he had to run, this will be a slightly shorter session now, but let's first turn now to Martina. Martina, so you're here in Belém. You're running the Secretariat of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. That's great. So we heard a bit from Adalberto. What are you, in a sense, what are you looking forward to in the next we've got one more week, haven't we, before, just over a week before we end the COP. There's a lot happening next week, I think.
A lot has happened already, and a lot will still happen. What has happened
is Martina's microphone working, or shall we pass another one over? Let's go there.
Already is that in the World Leaders Summit.
It's called Pass the Microphone. It's a new kids game. It's a new kids game called Pass the Microphone.
Okay, so what has happened already is in the World Leaders Summit, we did have heads of state talking about the relevance of methane. So we got methane and other non-CO2 pollutants really up on the radar. That was one, but that's the tip of the iceberg of what has been happening. We have seen a third edition of methane and non-CO2 summit. The first two were with the US and China. This one was with China, Brazil, and UK. And it has shown that the topic is very much on everybody's list of to-do. And we had a very positive spirit coming out of this event with a number of things that were launched. And I'm happy to get into those. What is on the radar for next week is Global Methane Pledge, ministerial. So we will take stock. We will have a stock take report as well halfway through the goal year 2030. And maybe as a sneak preview there as well, well, we see it's working, but it's not working fast enough. Let's put it that way. And then you can see it as a half glass full, half glass empty. But definitely we need to accelerate the actions. And that is what is happening here as well, because it's a COP focused on implementation. And Brazil has made a real effort to mobilize everybody around the action agenda, those 30 topics that those who listened to Adalberto earlier know already that was something that Brazil has put on. But we have one specific action agenda on non-CO2, methane on non-CO2, with 3 acceleration plans. And that is the spirit. We have to accelerate the action. And then we have them as well in agriculture, in waste, and in fossil fuels. And that is interesting as well, because obviously it's the 3 key sectors for methane action. So we've been able to bring together a community around that to advance. And behind the scenes, there's a lot of discussions, bilateral, trilateral, multilateral. So you see there's a real community coming forward with that spirit. Now, maybe to some of the announcements, there has been a fossil fuel statement. You may go, oh yeah, yet another statement. But it's really critical, and it connects to what Julia was saying. There's a real opportunity to use the market levers, to push for no or zero methane product in the fossil fuel sector, because the industry can do it. The biggest low-cost opportunities are in this industry. We look at investments that are needed that are less than 2% of what the industry made actually in benefits in a year. So there's really no excuse. There is money. We know the technologies. A lot of it is actually, well, there's a lot has to do with plumbing in the sense, repairing leaky pipes, changing valves, and so on. There's some things that require a bit more infrastructure investment as well and are more difficult, but it's doable. People know how to do it. The thing is, and that goes right back to, if it makes business sense, it's not too costly, it makes sense because you're not, Mia Motley said, you're burning money in the sense, if you're releasing it just into the air, you're letting it escape, or you burn it and we're losing money. But why is it not done? It's not done because investing that very same dollar in new exploration gives you a bigger return on investment. That's why companies are not doing it, and that's why we need regulation, just as much as we need the transparency that Julia has been talking about. So it's a dual track that we need to advance at the same time, because obviously regulation is only effective if we can actually afterwards also look at, has it happened? So there's a reporting and transparency issue coming with that. And there has been a real push for that with the fossil fuel regulatory program that we have been doing, but also with this new statement that does take a partnership approach, an approach of shared responsibility, and looks at performance standards. And I say performance standards because they could be national, they could be regional, and driving this market.
Adalberto from Brazil before was quite clear. They have a clear, for example, with waste plan. They brought 13 cities together. They provided some catalytic money to start dealing with methane emissions from waste tips, which are a big deal in Latin America, by the way. I think people need to know who are watching the show. They're not just minor in this story. And then also, a clear strategy with methane that's captured being kind of brought back in as a fuel, 1% every year over the next, 12 years, rising to maybe 10% by, 2037 or something. I mean, these are clear strategies, aren't they? Are anybody else doing clear strategies like that?
Absolutely. There are more countries that have put into place strategies to address waste as well. And thanks for having put waste on the radar, because people are focusing on fossil fuels, but we should not forget waste. And also there are options in agriculture, and we may be able to get to that too. But waste, we need to deal with waste in any case, methane or no methane. and it's a cost factor for municipalities. So they have to do it. There's sanitation. There's a huge land use issue because landfills gobble up a lot of land. You have problems with health. There is odor. There is pollution of the air, of the soil, of the water that comes with that, and so on. Now, you mentioned Latin America. Actually, 50% of waste, municipal solid waste in Latin America is organic waste. So it deserves being pulled out and given a special treatment, because if you separate waste in the organic waste out of it, your other waste management becomes cheaper. People should think as well, landfills are extremely expensive. First, it's the capital that is required to build them, fully sanitized landfills, but then it's also the operating cost. If you're able to move upstream with the action, so we keep food as food, and there has been a food waste breakthrough here, bringing together a whole community, because that helps with food security and nutrition security. If we look at keeping organic waste or turning organic waste into a material. Adalberto spoke about the composting. There's composting facilities not only in Brazil, but also in Mexico City. We've learned about that as well. So this is something that's up and coming. I'm sure you thought, oh yeah, she will come back with her black soldier fly farming, but that's also a way from very small businesses to large enterprises to deal with organic waste and turning it into protein. So there's circularity opportunities that come with economic opportunity and job creation. And there's huge jobs that are being created. And it's a way, particularly in this region as well, to include informal workers into it and take them out of precarity to parity.
Good, Martina. I want to go back to Julia a second on this before we come back to Ingmar, and then we'll just talk a bit about agriculture. But Julia, 12%. So you issue information when there is a big leak of methane from somewhere. You then inform the country, presumably, or maybe you inform the business. I don't know. Maybe you can just clear that up for us. And then you hope that they will act. So you got a response rate of 12%. What about let me do my numbers right, the 88% that didn't respond? Do they write back and go, sorry, we missed your email? Or what do they do? Do they just ignore you? And how do we make sure they don't ignore you next time?
So let me explain how it works. We do notify governments and companies when the companies are in the oil and gas methane partnership, and this is because we have the contacts. Otherwise, we go to the government focal point. There was a request by UNEP and the co-conveners of the Global Methane Pledge to all countries to nominate a Mars focal point. Some countries did, some countries didn't. When we don't have a focal point, we notify the UNEP permanent representatives. These are the UN ambassadors in the country. So someone is informed in the government, and when we have the contacts in the company as well. So this 12% is is when a company or government gave us a precise information. It means that they looked into the satellite alert, they sent teams on the ground to investigate, they explained to us what was the issue and how they fix it. So we don't count those who say, thank you for your email, we'll look into that, and don't give us more details. So the 12% is those who are actually seriously looking into the notification. That said, you're absolutely right, it's not enough. We need every country and every company to respond. Because we know action is possible. We're seeing it around the globe. I mean, from Argentina to Libya to Yemen to Turkmenistan, we have 100% response rate in some cases. And
I'm just wondering, Julia, whether there's a mechanism like, maybe at the next meeting of the UNEP environment ministers when they meet in Nairobi, to remind them that they may well one day be getting a letter like this from you, Julia. I know it's not coming from you, Julia, but it's nice if we personalize it and say it's coming from you. That they just to reawaken to the fact that they need to respond, yeah?
But absolutely, and this is what we do, and UNEP will continue to work with its Mars partners, the CCAC, the International Energy Agency, the World Bank, the EU as co-convener of the Global Methane Pledge, to ensure that governments nominate focal points if they haven't done that, and that all governments and companies respond to methane alerts and turn this opportunity into real methane cuts. Where capacities are lagging, we provide capacity building. So we're doing everything we can to ensure that these alerts are responded, and this is really on the agenda of UNEP's discussions with countries. So be reassured that this response rate will have grown at the next COP.
Okay, thanks, Julia. Ingmar, just come back to you. What you've heard so far? What are you thinking here?
I mean, I love this satellite information. What do you call solution, and it's really needed. We need to identify where we see that we're leaking methane, and we need to reach out to those that have the leak and have them to pull the plug, to tap it. And I would love to explore a way to partner with you so that we on time can publish this information publicly. Wherever it's a leak, it should not just be a letter send behind closed doors. It should be public information so we can engage with the audience.
Julia's coming back on that.
Amazing.
And if I may, the information is publicly available on our methane data platform. So anyone can get this information, and we'll make sure that we share it with you as well.
Let us talk more after this. I would love to involve my tech team to make those updates available, and we don't have time.
Martina, yeah.
I'm happy to jump in as well, because obviously working on the regulation side, often it's a capacity problem as well. And working with countries, putting up their own regulation and looking at that they have the enforcement capabilities will help with the response rates at the same time. So that's where the parallel track comes in, helping the countries. So we've done the first 3, so it's step by step, right? We are now ready to announce the next 5 countries. So
okay.
Regulation.
To make this clear then, you create the regulations with the countries, then they can have an enforcement team to go out and deal with the problem. So there's a bit of chicken and egg here as well. So this might start improving the rates of response, yeah?
That might, over time, also improve the rates of response. If we look at regulation and suggesting that the regulation says, well, companies need to measure themselves and bring things back, that's one way of helping that companies adopt the OGMP. That's one. So there's a whole, it's a bit of a circular thing, but it will hopefully build an upward spiral.
Quickly, we've only got 3 minutes and a bit. Just pause a second, Ingmar, on this. But what about, you wanted to mention one thing was agriculture, because we can't ignore this. We're in Brazil, right? It's a massive issue. But briefly, do you, Adalberto, we never got that far because he had to go. Are the Brazilians doing anything with the agricultural story, or is anybody?
Absolutely. Brazil has an ABC plan, it's called. We've been supporting Brazil. They've made a request. We have 2 big livestock projects going on with Brazil to help actually improve the situation. There is a whole work stream on tropical agriculture that Brazil brought into the G20 discussions as the presidency of G20. So yes, there is a leadership role. There's something doing at home. There's a leadership role. And obviously as the co-chair as well, we will have an agriculture flagship that is going to be launched. And we thought it was necessary to focus people's attention to the topic. We say it's the hardest to crack. It's super sensitive. It's super sensitive everywhere in the world, not only here. And the idea is, it's not to blame the farmers. The farmers are not the problem. The farmers are part of the solution. So we have to turn around the paradigm that this is not misunderstood. And there are ways to help farmers to do what they're good at doing. They love their animals. It's about animal health. If we get animal health right, we can reduce methane emissions as well. If we look at livestock, ruminants. There's something about breeding. There's something about alternate wet drying in rice cultivation, which helps in the end dealing with water. That becomes an adaptation measure. So it helps farmers. So if we take it from that angle, it's not about all the measures out there. It's about doing those things that are absolutely doable, give the farmers more money into their pockets, and help with the outcomes. We'll have a fertilizer fertilizer declaration coming up. That's all about nutrient management. And it helps them improve their productivity.
Yeah. And in fact, there are so many examples around the world how you can deal with these things, somehow getting them into the marketplace. We actually had a guy on from the Gold Standard, an Asian chap from India, who they produce methane credits from the rice industry, and they manage the water quantities down, there's less water used, less methane, and everybody's happy. So, Ingmar, you wanted to say something on this, yeah?
Yeah, I wanted to add that it's a blame game many times. It's the farmers' fault. They are breeding cows, burping a lot of methane, etc. And it's, of course, it's everyone's responsibility that are releasing those emissions. But I think there's a solution, and some countries have already gone that route. In Denmark, for example, they are giving subsidies, money to farmers to pay them, to give them a supplementary for the cows to burp less. And of course, the farmer will not pay for this. They don't have the money. So I think we should not only be talking about money for climate adaptation or deforestation, stopping deforestation. We should have a global fund providing money to cutting methane emission. And we don't need US money for it. There's a lot of other money there. There's a lot of billionaires there. If you want to cool the planet with 0.5 degrees, we need either regulation that make it really unlawful to do it, or we need to pay those that can do it. Maybe we need a combination, but we don't need to wait for making this illegal. We just need to put the money behind the action, and we will get the action. This is a brilliant solution, much more efficient than carbon removal. We need to do that too, but this is something we can do. Today, we can cool the planet with 0.5 degrees. Isn't that cool?
So I get the sense, Martina, that things are moving. It's not just declarations and statements. I mean, you need declarations and you need statements. People need to put their heads over the parapet and say they're going to do something, and then we have to follow up and find out whether they do it or not, yeah? But, you know, actually standing up and being counted is important. But I got this real sense from Adalberto from the Ministry here of Environment here that they now are walking the talk, and the COP30 is having an impact on Brazil as well, which is a really important country.
Absolutely. And I mean, when he was talking about the composting side, that is something that stays, that's very concrete. They're walking the talk with their own regulation. We've been supporting Brazil with a Plano Clima effort, with, capacity in the country to actually come forward with the right targets, then looking at different key sectors. So there's a whole thing, and they have become the model for us to build our super pollutant country action accelerator that we've launched here as well. It starts with 7 countries that get a bigger injection of funding for a programmatic effort, but they get also a team in-house, because often it is about the institutions. It has to be someone's job. In the end, it's only about us being really behind it and driving. It does come down to people in the end. So we're doing that, and that's modeling what we know has worked in the Montreal Protocol. So it's setting up the implementation infrastructure, and we want to grow it from now to 7 countries to supporting 30.
Okay, good. I think we have to wrap up there. Julia, thanks so much for coming in on a Saturday and sharing the information from the report. That was really great. Best of luck with your work. Fantastic. Martina, of course, best of luck with your work as well. We'll hear some more maybe towards the end about what's happened with methane and the other super pollutants here at COP. Ingmar, thanks for being there, and thanks to everybody for watching. Stay with us.
I think every single person on this planet needs to be educated and re-educated about climate change. We are dedicated as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to embrace this education issue.
We can look into the eyes of our children, our grandchildren, and we can finally say, tell them that we have joined hands to bequeath a more habitable world.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
State Congress voted to ban abortion. Alternate universe located.
Global temperatures rise.
The effects on social media on Generation Z.
rising sea levels, and dying coral reefs, the epicenter of a global pandemic.
No exception for rape or incest.
Hello and welcome back. We will now talk about another thing, not buy more time, but how we can move the travel in a more sustainable way. We are here in Belém, and there's been tens of thousands of delegates that have been flying here, and many have been flying quite long, and that release a lot of emission, and that's also many times often criticizing those climate meetings. It's only people flying there and talking about that we need to stop flying. And it's some truth in that, but it doesn't need to be that way. For example, when I founded We Don't Have Time 8 years ago, I didn't fly for 5 years because I really didn't want to. I want to limit my carbon footprint, and when I looked into what I as a private individual could do, limiting my way of traveling and use train, etc., is really something that helped me cut my carbon footprint more than in half, in fact, in 2/3. But it's very hard to be an international organization without traveling, and when you work in media, it's always this, should I go there and report so that millions of people not needs to go there, etc., etc. And I do believe that we need to travel, and that's where I found this amazing solution that no one talked about, I think it was 3 years ago, that is actually possible to fly on sustainable air fuel, not using fossil fuel. It cut emission with 70 to 80%. And for me, the most important thing, my money is not going to the fossil fuel companies. It's going to the companies that we have with us here in this session that are producing the sustainable fuel, not by digging up it from the ground and putting the money to stop people like me from having a voice. So travel, we have actually the technology. Not many people knows it. An often argument I hear when I talk about the solution is that, yeah, but are you sure the fuel is used in your airplane? No, I'm not. I don't care about that, because as long as my money goes to the solution and there is a plane out there that's using the sustainable air fuel that I pay for, we are scaling the sustainable solution. So Move the Travel is not only about air travel, it's about everything. I mean, heavy transport, cars, bicycles, everything. We really want to focus on all the solutions we have out there that can cut emission from travel and get us off oil, because we really want to travel. And nowadays we can do it. And therefore, I'm very proud to introduce our guest here in the studio and on Zoom. Maybe the best way to travel is actually to beam in here on Zoom. So we have amazing people with us, and I would like to start with introducing Johanna Audinsdottir, Director of Climate Sustainability at Landsvirkjun, the national power company of Iceland. Welcome here.
Thank you.
And Johan Falk, the co-founder of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative that gathers a lot of leading businesses, big companies like Google, Microsoft, to help them to cut their emission. Welcome here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And on Zoom, we have Christian Møllerholst from Goodwings. You're beaming in from Denmark. Hi, Christian.
Hi, Copenhagen says hi.
And Per Lundgren from Åre Östersund Airport in northern Sweden. Actually, it's my hometown where I grew up, so it's a little bit special to have you here on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. I can tell you that the snow is falling in Ås Östersund also.
Yeah, that's a very, very small village where I went to school when I was a children. And you're representing the airport in the region.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And lastly, Luisa Bisold, Head of Communication and Corporate Development of of Norsk e-fuel, and you are working on producing and setting up a factory for e-fuel that we will hear more about very soon, right?
Exactly. Thanks for having me.
We actually have almost everyone we need to make this happen in this room, so I'm really looking forward to hear what we can talk about. And let's start with Christian. You are kind of making this infrastructure happen because almost at the same time I founded We Don't Have Time, you founded a sustainable travel platform. Christian, tell us about your work and how you do it and what you do and what brought you to do it. Well, how come you started it?
Well, thank you, Ingmar, for having me here. First of all, let me just correct. I don't consider ourselves a sustainable travel company, but rather a responsible travel company, because we can do so much. But a quick introduction to Goodwings. We're a travel management company, like you know them, the SAP Concur, the Amex Business Travel, CWT, etc. So we're Copenhagen-based, but we're serving clients all over the world. And besides I would call the hygienic factors, the basic travel management capabilities, the platform, the agents that are servicing clients offline, we've built a quite advanced climate software suite on top. And that is what has the most relevance for today's conversation, because it not only analyzes all the data points in our clients' travel and enables them to report up against whatever regime they're met with, the CSRD or local legislation, but it also identifies all the carbon hotspots in their business travel. So it basically, before Goodwings, a lot of the companies that come to us, they see the business travel as a black box. So we try to uncover the black box and actually help them to get data insights into the travel pattern, but also where are the low-hanging fruits? How can we get certain routes that they travel on air? How can we change that to rail? How can we get people out of business class on short or mid-haul flights and into economy? And how can we avoid certain trips in the first place? So that's what we do. And we also have an ambition, and I think we'll come back to that later today in today's discussion, but we also feel quite passionate about us as being in part of the industry in how can we make SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, more accessible. Thank you.
And that's, I mean, we are using your platform, and it's really helpful. When you book a journey, you see the carbon emission, and you can compare different alternatives. And just a simple thing to travel a route where you don't need to land in between can save a lot of carbon. So ways of doing things smarter, that is really hard to know if you don't have the information. And I love this functionality that you also can set a carbon budget. So when it's up, you can't do more travel for that year. And that's actually saving organization a lot of money, because travel is expensive. So if you only do it when you need to do it, you save money, you save emission, and you become more profitable as a company. With us, we now have Per from Swedavia that operates 10 airports in Sweden. And I know you have been doing a lot to advocate for making all the planes landing on your airport to do it in a more sustainable way. Can you tell us a little bit what you have been doing and how you do it?
Yeah, thank you. Since we are a small community in the north of Sweden, we know everybody. So in our little village called Trillevallen, they were hosting the Telemark World Cup. It's a ski type, the Telemark. But they needed to have people flying in to our airport from all around the world. So what did we do? We talked about lower emissions, but how can we do it when you fly? Of course, you can add the SAF fuel. So we need to have more SAF fuel, and just keep it in mind when we arrange the competitions. So all the athletes that flew in from all around the world, the amount of kilometers needed to fly, we added the SAF fuel for that amount. And also the bigger village called Åre, they host a bigger competition, the Alpine World Cup skiing. They had like 500 athletes and team members. So, okay, how many people are flying? How long are they flying? how much SAF fuel do we need to add to the system instead of the fossil fuel? And then also, everybody's looking, what are they doing? So the next step was the Östersund, the music festival called Storsjöyran. Fantastic festival. Everybody's coming home and cheering and looking at great artists. They need to fly to this city, some artists, some people. Okay, so how do we do it more climate friendly? We add the SAF. So the organizer for the music festival, they added SAF for all flights during the festival. So it's easy. Just do the transition. Just take initiative. We need to have the flying to this remote city. So add more SAF and lower the emissions.
And that's interesting. Did the festival pay for that? Because it costs more than using the normal fuel, right?
Of course, and I love that you say it, because money is the key here. If you have sponsors, you can have another sponsor taking care of the extra cost for the fossil-free fuel. You have sponsors for everything nowadays, but I don't think that it's the first thing that you ask a sponsor. Can you take care of our emissions? So that was one of the steps that the music festival took. They added a sponsor for this SAF fuel, and also in the sports sector. So it's easy when you have sponsors, then you get the money, and then you can buy the extra SAF fuel.
So this is really something that event organizers can provide and lower their carbon emission substantially. Just to know the size here, but we're talking about a festival. How many people were participating in this festival?
People visiting in this festival is like 50,000 people, but the flights to this small town is only like 9 flights during this weekend. But however, we need to take care of the emissions from those 9 flights. So if a small town can do it with 9 flights with a small amount of money, a bigger city can do it with more flights, with more money. So it's starting to like ripple effects.
I think we're 50,000 people traveling here, so it's something for the next COP presidency. Now, we don't know if it's going to be in Turkey or Australia, but maybe they should chip in that in order to get the vote to host the COP. But now we're moving on to the producer side. And before that, I would like to set the stage a little bit for you, Louisa. And that's one thing I hear many times. And actually, the latest time I heard it when I was interviewing the Norwegian climate minister. One argument against sustainable air fuel is that it's very hard to scale it. We don't have enough land to grow biofuel, and if we use the land to produce air fuel, we will not be able to produce food, and the food price will go up, and it's not really the road to go. But they don't often know that there's also another way to produce sustainable air fuel that I'm really excited about, that I will give you the mic to talk about, but it's synthetic electric fuel. It has nothing to do with producing it from forest or anything, but you can actually do it by capturing the carbon directly from the air and reverse the process and produce a fuel that is produced from carbon dioxide, but not from the ground, but from the air. So I think that's really exciting. So Louisa, please tell us how is this working, and what are you doing right now to make this be scaling the production?
Yeah, thanks for this introduction. I'm very excited to be here and talk about this, because as you said, when we are today talking about SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel, we're usually talking about biofuel, because that is the fuel that is available today, right? But there are other ways, and as you said, it's about efficient ways of using land. It's about efficient ways of using water. It's about efficient ways of using our resources that we have available, and that can be renewable, right? Like where we can have a circular economy to produce these kind of fuels. And in practice, that means for us, for example, is that we are producing a synthetic aviation fuel that from chemical components is exactly the same as it is as fossil fuels are, right? So we can use it in existing infrastructures, planes, pipelines, on the airports, right? Like even in remote airports, we don't have to change the infrastructure like you would have to do for hydrogen or battery electric planes. And the nice thing about it is that we can do it with resources that we have available today. We need water, we need CO2, and we need power. Those are the three ingredients that we need in order to produce synthetic aviation fuel. With these three ingredients, we can basically, the first step that you do is to produce an e-crude, which is basically like similar to fossil fuel, fossil crude. So you can produce whatever fuel or product you're producing. You can produce that from that e-crude. And what we are doing is that we have optimized the process that we are planning to implement in order for it to produce as much kerosene as possible. So from a usual refining process, it's around 20 to 40% that comes out is kerosene if it's well done. We can produce up to 80% aviation fuel, and we're looking into even optimizing the process even further to produce even more kerosene from that process. And we're focusing on the aviation industry, as you said, because aviation industry is one of the hard to abate sectors, and especially long-haul flights. While hydrogen and battery electric planes might be a feasible solution for short or medium scale flights, right? Long-haul flights flying from Germany to Brazil is not possible on battery electric planes, and it will not as long as the technologies do not evolve. So we need these liquid energy carriers. And yeah, that's what we're doing. We are based in Norway. We are planning to have 3 plants in operation by 2032 to produce 250 million liters of e-fuel, which is roughly enough to fly every Norwegian from Oslo to Paris once a year. This will save around 120,000 tons of CO2 every year. We're actually one of the production plants that we are building is not too far away from where Per is. It's in Alby, in Sweden, in the municipality of Alme. Yeah, and we're hoping to have that operational in 2030. So it's definitely, while biofuels have the advantage that they're available today, e-fuels still need a bit of time, but they are definitely an unavoidable solution for the future.
That's very impressive. We will talk more about how this fuel can compete with the fossil fuel, because it's still more expensive. But Johan, over to you. You are representing so many leading businesses, and you're you're helping them. Silent in the class, please. You're helping them to scale exponential solutions like these solutions and many others. What's your view on e-fuel and sustainable air fuel from your side?
Well, firstly, to state, aviation is a hard-to-abate sector, and it is really a scarce resource. It's primarily the rich people, the rich world, who is using aviation today, so it's quite unfair as well from that perspective. So we should really treat that as a scarce resource as individuals and so on. At the same time, I would say aviation is incredibly important for to connect people all over the world, and for peace and for trade. So I don't really see a viable option to say we will stop flying, but we need to really see it as a valuable resource. So what can we do in the short term, the long term? What we are recommending to our companies, of course, is to have policies in place. So we are scarce on using aviation, of course, where we can use other alternatives. And when we select aviation, we look at the routes, we look at the companies, and we can also look at adding sustainable aviation fuel. Yes, but I think it's so important for this industry to have a long-term vision to say, well, we need to crack this question from a long-term perspective. What is the vision to actually completely transform to e-fuel and actually scale up renewable energy incredibly to the point that we actually can produce the volumes required and drive down the cost so it outcompete jet fuels. I think that should be the vision, and mobilize all the investments required. That I think would be very progressive.
And in order to produce e-fuel, you need a lot of power and energy. And Johanna, you are a director of any company on Iceland that actually you have a lot of energy in the ground with you know, the heat and everything. How do you see e-fuel? Is that something Iceland can become a big exporter? I know that you produce a lot of aluminium because it's very energy intense. Do you work on e-fuel solutions, and what do you see about this solution?
We have been thinking of e-fuels. I think it's difficult. I mean, if we just start with aviation, I completely agree. It's a scarce it should be a scarce resource, but still we need it. And Iceland is located in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. We're heavily dependent on flying to be connected to anybody. We cannot go to a business meeting in Denmark through train or through car. We need to do it by flight. And there are all other hard-to-abate sectors in Iceland that actually highly relate to this topic. Shipping, of course, of goods and services, and the fisheries in which we heavily depend on. So there are a lot of hard-to-abate sectors actually that do really matter to Icelanders that are still reliant on fossil fuels. And Iceland has been ambitious in their climate action and on energy transition, hoping to be able to be rid of fossil fuel by 2040. And these are really the pillar stones, the aviation, the SAF, and the shipping and the fisheries. But I have to admit, coming in here, there has been difficulties regarding economy of scale. Iceland is a relatively small nation. We don't have experience in the oil and gas field. We are fully renewable with electricity and heating from geothermal and hydro. So we need for us to be able to produce e-fuels, we need to both upskill quite a bit, and we also need the energy into it. And it's a lot of electricity that is needed to generate e-fuels like this. So at the time being, we, in a sense, have to be quite reliant on others. But we have just now, actually yesterday, the Icelandic government published a draft of a new industrial strategy that is aiming and looking at e-fuel production and other matters to kind of how we can, with our renewable energy, have even further impact. So we have done the electricity and the electrification, but how can we kind of move forward and make sure that those hard-to-abate sectors are also something that we can challenge and that we can move away from fossil fuels with.
So it's very much we need to put the money to help scale this technology. It's like everything else. When solar were new, it was super expensive. Mm-hmm. Now it's cheaper and cheaper. And if we put the same effort into scaling electric e-fuel, it seems like we can make the same thing happen. But someone needs to pay for it. And the way the market works today is that it's very much voluntarily. Yeah. Some are doing it, very few. Most are not doing it. And we at We Know Time and Move the Traveler, we want to create a better, more demand for this solution, so that more events, like Per talked about, and more private individuals are using this solution. But when I talk to airlines about this, they have a little bit different view on who's going to pay for it. Many times they say that you need to give us the money. You need to lower tax on carbon in order for us to be able to afford spending on sustainable air fuel. For me, that's a little bit backwards, because we need the money to be funneled into the sustainable air fuels, and we need to give the airlines a big incentive to do it. I think it's hard for the airlines to pay for it themselves, actually. But I have, at least me personally, I have no problem to give government money to airlines funneling into the sustainable air fuel, but we should direct it to that. We should not give them subsidies and a blank check. But I want to hear your view on this, Per, because you are in close contact with many airlines. And I know that this is not easy. I heard, I think it was an airline, Norwegian, that said that they did a survey among their clients, among their travel customers, where many said, yes, we want to pay for sustainable air fuel. And when they launched the product, no one did it. No one paid for it. So what's your view on this, Per?
Of course, it's really hard when you have the responsibility is on the passenger. But I think that they are onto something. We only have one airline company traveling to and from our little city, but then they have extra Euro bonus is our frequent flyer program. So they have extra points for those who add SAF fuel for their travel. So they use the transport of means and they add the extra SAF fuel, so they get some extra points. So that's one way to do it. But I think we need to have the lawmakers to really urge the companies and the lawmakers to do something about adding more SAF. That's the only way forward.
And Christian, you are booking so many travel for your clients. How do you see we can really put the money in front of this?
Well, we do have clients who opt in for SAF, so they fly either partially or fully on SAF. But generally speaking, I would say that the willingness to pay is very low. And I would like to add to the discussion another perspective. If you look at the EU, we have certain mandates. So the mandates are basically directed not towards the airlines, which many people think, but to the fuel suppliers delivering the fuel to the airlines. So the mandates are all about you need to supply X% of the fuel you deliver to your customers, the airlines, needs to be SAF by X date. And I believe by 2030, Louisa probably knows this better than I think it's around 4 or 5%, something like that.
By 2030 is 6% and 1.2% of it needs to be e-fuel. And it's scaling up to 70% in 2050, of which 35 need to be e-fuels.
Okay, so the issue is HEFA, or bio-based jet fuel, can basically get us to the 6%. So the problem is we need to start tomorrow to go beyond, because at some point we'll run out of bio-based SAF, whether we find new ways of producing it with the biomass from trees or municipal waste or other feedstocks. I think the key here is interdependency and the acknowledgement of interdependency, because we cannot look at the airlines and ask them to fly on SAF when we don't want to pay extra. Having been in the travel industry for 10 years, I am on a daily basis astonished with the fact that C-suite, executives are looking at the lowest possible price every single time. There's a reason that Ryanair is one of the most successful companies in Europe, airlines in Europe. So price is king. The airlines can hardly be profitable in the first place. Very few airlines besides Ryanair and Lufthansa are profitable today. Most are, just balancing. So how and fuel cost is by far one of the largest OPEX in an airline. So we need to find ways of changing the paradigm, and that comes with acknowledgement of the interdependency. The companies need to acknowledge that if they want to fly on something else than fossil jet fuel in 5-10 years time, they need to start insetting today, not just relying on offsetting or not doing anything in the first place.
Yes, we do. And now we're soon running over time here, and I want to give all the speakers we have left one sentence very, very quickly. We start with you, Louisa. What's your big ask to get more funding into your business? Where do you think that can come from? What's your biggest challenge, if you're very short?
Commitment. I think I'm adding to what Chris said, and I think there are airlines out there that are committing today in order to have the fuels available, like our partners in Norwegian, and it's kind of like this commitment that we all need that we're all in this together. Like the passengers have to pay a little more. The airlines need to make sure that the fuel is produced. The suppliers need to make sure that the fuel is produced. So we kind of like need all to get together and to solve it together. And if we're collaborating, we'll get there. But it's about collaborating, and it's about everyone understanding that they have to do their bit in order to get us there. So this is what we need, and it's about funding, it's about the CO2 availability, it's about the offtake, it's about access to infrastructures so that the blending terminals are open. So it's about collaboration.
Thank you. And Johanna, what do you need in Iceland to make this scale?
I think the value chains have to be, they're all connected, and it has to be a collaborative effort. This has been a COP of tipping points in a way, and this needs to become a positive tipping point. We need to be able to move it over the needle so it's affordable and just makes sense. And for that to happen, everybody needs to kind of just step on board and take bold decisions. We did it with geothermal for heating. Actually, a lot of people in Iceland were against geothermal for heating before we did it. And I think nobody would admit that today because it just makes sense. Yeah. And we need this for e-fuels.
It's a good example. And Johan?
I think Europe can set a vision to move towards, let's say, 90% e-fuels by 2045 and put in the mechanism together with the industry, which has to be economical incentives to go on that exponential curve and basically move towards that bold vision.
And with that, we need to move on to our next session. And if you want to know more on how you can move the travel, go to wedon'thatime.org/move the travel. And we have a lot of instruction guides and information on what you can do as a business or individual to make this happen. Let's move the travel and save the future. So next session will be about the power of power grids. So it's a perfect align with what we have talked about here. So let's go to that.
I think every single person on this planet needs to be educated and re-educated about climate change. We are dedicated as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to embrace this education issue.
We can look into the eyes of our children, our grandchildren, and we can finally say, tell them that we have joined hands to bequeath a more habitable world.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
State Congress voted to ban abortion. Alternate universe located.
Global temperatures rise.
The effects on social media on Generation Z.
To avoid catastrophe, rising sea levels, and dying coral reefs, the epicenter of a global pandemic.
No exception for rape or incest.
As the world races to decarbonize, there is, of course, much talk about renewable energy, batteries, wind farms, solar panels, etc. But nothing of this really works without strong, connected grids. So this is what we're going to talk about today in this session, the power of the grids. So building this technology is not really only about technology. It's also about policy, it's about planning, and it's about people. That's why I'm so delighted to have these guests here with me in the studio today. We're going to talk about how we ensure that innovation and investment really reach every region also, and not just the wealthiest ones, because that's really also a big topic of this conversation. So to help us navigate these difficult questions, but also very important questions, we have Renee Morrow, Senior Vice President, Strategy and Sustainability of Aon. You're all the way down to that side. Vilmar Suarez, your Latin America Energy Analyst at Ember. And we have Rana Arib, Executive Director of REN21. And Peter Lydén, fellow Swede here, Head of International Climate Policy at German Watch. So, Renee, could you please maybe start to set the scene for us and talk about what is really the role of the power grid in the energy transition, and why can't we just swap the fossil generators to biofuel-used ones, but the ones that use biofuels?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the question. I will start maybe with a scenario that we already see today in our grids. E.ON is one of Europe's largest DSO, and in our grids it is where the energy transition is happening, right? In some regions at peak times we already see today 700% renewable energy feeding into our grids compared to the peak demand that we have in these hours, especially in summer when we have a lot of solar feeding into the grid. And 700% is a lot, and that's why we are seeing the energy transition basically as a two-step approach. In stage one, it was about ramping up renewables, which was really important and which was already in some regions a huge success. And now we are entering into the second stage, and it's about integrating renewables into the system. Not only renewables, by the way, but also flexibility options. Biomass is one of the flexibility options that we see. Battery is another one. Demand-side management is a very important one. And we need to integrate everything into the system, and there power grids, special distribution power grids, given the decentralized generation structures, play an important role. Digitalization is key. We are currently building digital twins of our grids in order to simulate better what a new renewable installation or a new flexibility option have as an impact to the grid. And what we want to have is locational signals so that investors in renewables, investors in flexibility options know where to locate their installations.
So this expansion, of course, needs to be done in a sustainable manner. So how do we do this in practice? How do we make sure that this transition is done in a sustainable way when it comes to all the aspects of sustainability?
But I think efficiency plays a key role here. Efficiency in terms of saving money. There's a lot of potentials. Each kilowatt hour that is curtailed, for example, is a loss. So if we are smarter, if we know better where we need the additional renewable power, we will save a lot of money, and this is an important issue because we need to maintain affordability for maintaining also social acceptance of the energy transition. And the second point is, of course, it is about an efficient usage of resources. Each power line that we don't need is, for us, even as a DSO, it's a saving. It's an important saving because we don't need the resources, we don't need the money, but we also don't need the material. So there's a lot of potential to making the energy transition more efficient and by this more sustainable. And then if we are building our networks, then there's of course our ambition to realize the circular economy as best as we can.
Thank you very much. So, Vilmar, Ember is an energy think tank that has become a household name among climate-minded people. So, if you look across Latin America, what do you see as the main opportunities and also the main bottlenecks here in this region's transition? And how do power grids figure into this equation?
Yeah, and thanks for having me here. Latin America generates about 60% of its electricity from renewables. This is very, very important. More or less 17 from solar and wind. This is above the global average, but it still has a lot of opportunities and also bottlenecks in order to move forward for the clean energy transition. So I will say maybe the main opportunity is how to take advantage of the vast amount of renewable resources that Latin America has. Very good wind speed in Chile, in La Patagonia, in Argentina, even in the north of Colombia, but also very good solar irradiation in most of the countries of the region. So how to take advantage of that resources in order to power the development of the region. Currently, LATAM has more than 18 million people without access to electricity. So this is a very good opportunity in order to move forward. What will be the main bottlenecks? I will say there is an outdated regulatory framework, most focus on large generators, centralized generators without incentive for storage, for increasing the transmission capacity, for improving the flexibility of the network. But also there is political instability, and that sends signals to investors that is maybe at some point difficult to invest in the region. So this is a very important challenge. Also transmission. There is lack of transmission almost in all the countries in the region, and this is a very huge barrier in order to move forward with renewable energy generation. And just to end here, I will say there is a big opportunity to have interconnection between the countries of South America in order to take advantage of the complementarity of the sources, wind, hydro, and solar, and to decrease the price of the kilowatt hours and to take advantage of those communities who can make some kind of growth having renewable energy at the center of the development.
Thank you very much. So you recently worked on a report on Chile. So could you share with us the key findings from this report, and also maybe what bearings these findings can have on other countries of this region?
Yeah, and Chile is a success case for the energy transition in Latin America and in the world, generating more than 30% of its electricity from renewables and solar and wind, and more than 22% from solar, which is great. 10 years ago, Chile was generating almost 0% from solar. Now it's generating 22%. So it's doing well, mainly based on a stable regulatory and policy framework for the energy sector, attracting investors, multilateral banks, private sector, etc. But now Chile is moving to the second half of its transition, and it's how to take advantage of all that installed capacity. And maybe the main challenge now is curtailment. And why curtailment? Chile is wasting the possibility to use most of its renewable energy generation. During the last 2 years, curtailment multiplied by 4, and in the last year, we are talking about 5.6 terawatts hour. This is so much electricity that cannot be used in Chile. What are the reasons for this? Mainly lack of transmission capacity. Most of the solar and mainly solar generation projects are located in the north of the country, while the demand is located in the center and the south. So at many hours in the day, there is not enough capacity in the transmission lines to inject that electricity that could be generated. So it is wasted. Also, there is not enough capacity of storage, which would be an incredible tool in order to take advantage of that electricity. So Chile is working right now very hard on improving the conditions in order to use of that installed capacity of solar and wind, building 1,400 kilometers of transmission lines, moving forward to a goal of 6 gigawatts of storage. So the lesson here it will be, it's not only about installing capacity for generating, it's also at the same time working on transmission, working on flexibility, working on demand side response, and also working on storage.
Thank you. So Rana, turning now to you. For those that are watching and might not be familiar with REN 21, could you please tell us who you are, what you do, and also what perspective you promote in the terms of power grids?
Yeah, thank you very much. So REN 21 is a global network of players, governments, industry, science, academia, and NGOs dedicated to building a renewable-based economy for strong, resilient, and fairer societies. And I think this is basically one of the messages that is important. We realize that we have built not only an energy system, but also an economy and society around fossil fuel. And today, renewable energy needs to be the governing or setting the governing rules. And this is the first approach is it's not only about changing the energy system and the grid infrastructure, but it is also about creating the enabling environment and really developing the economy and society around it.
So how can we, if you'd like to elaborate, but how can we ensure that grids become really enablers of clean and equitable energy? access? I mean, not just barriers, because it's not easy, right?
The first part, I think, is really to change our understanding of what energy security means today and move from something that is a fossil fuel-based part to really an energy service thinking. Ultimately, it is about putting the energy demand and clients at the heart of the energy system. And I think this is also to build on the contributions before. What is really important is that we also have a much better understanding of the energy demand today, but also in the future. We clearly see that there is electrification trends in the transport sector, electrification in the building sector, and very often they are not accounted for, and there are even massive data gaps, and those players do not even sit around the table. So this is the first part. The other one is very clearly that when we are speaking about grids, sometimes we tend to say like we need to deploy more grids, but it is also about how do we basically those grids and the infrastructure elements in the best way. Obviously, it is also about flexibility options, etc. But it is also about really understanding that for having fair and sustainable energy infrastructure, we need affordability. That is also necessary to ensure the societal support. We do need to reduce environmental impacts because any infrastructure does have environmental impact. And this also means to have a good understanding of where distributed generation is happening, where distributed energy demand is happening, and really matching this together. Building on this example of Chile, for instance, and I think this is where we see on the policy side, there is not an alignment, and there has not been an alignment of the deployment of renewables and the deployment of electrification, for instance, or the decarbonization policies on the energy demand side. So I think it's about integrated energy planning and integrated policies.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. So turning now to Petter, for those watching that might not know German Watch, could you please tell us what you do and what your perspective is on this topic?
Absolutely. So German Watch is an organization that works on environmental sustainability and development together with partners in developing countries especially. One of our key areas is international climate policy, which is why I'm here at COP30.
So Petter, we've heard that undertaking this transformation of the grid will require collaboration on all levels, from governments to civil society and also business. So from your experience, what are the key factors that needs to be in place here to make effective collaboration, cooperation between those different sectors?
Yeah, so local, regional, national and international levels all have distinct roles in this implementation and improvement of grids. For an effective implementation, they need to be aligned and especially cooperate in both directions, from down to up and from up to down. Examples are, of course, locally, you can have microgrids. The regional level, you could have cross-border transmission lines, for example. National level is, of course, regulation and financing. And international, which is here in Belém, you have, for example, common goals that will set the direction for actors on all levels, but you would also have real commitments. What we, for example, would like to see here is a roadmap to phase out fossil fuels, which are in the making. And that would be crucial to give that direction that actors on these levels can use.
So let's open up this conversation. Next question actually goes to all of you, and anybody can answer. So who's the quickest? So there's much talk about smart grids, but maybe not everybody really understands what is a smart grid. What does it entail? So who would like to explain?
From our perspective, smart grid means, first of all, transparency about the grid, transparency of what's happening in the grid. Because in the end, as I said, grid stability means also system stability. And for this transparency, we need the data on all voltage levels, actually. Traditionally, the data and the transparency that we have at the TSO level and the transmission level is always better than the data that we have at the DSO level. But we need all the data because, as we heard already, the future of energy generation is distributed, is decentralized. Many, many millions small solar installations, for example. So we need to know when they feed into the electricity grid. We also need to know how many flexibility options are there, and the smart grid will provide the platform that is necessary for synchronizing all those new participants at a micro level of the electricity grid and to steer their behavior into the right direction. And the right direction is always grid stability, system stability. Without the data, we won't give them any clear signals what grid stability means at the very specific moment of time. This can be saving electricity, this can be injecting electricity, that can be when it comes to bidirectional charging e-vehicles, for example, it can be to take electricity out of the grid for several hours and then give it back to the grid. This is all about flexibility and of flexibility options, and those flexibility options won't work without a smart grid.
Thank you. Peter, you'd like to add?
Yeah, a somewhat wider definition of smart grids in the real life. Those are grids that reach all the people who need electricity and who would only transmit renewable energy.
Thank you. So we're already living in a much warmer world. We know that. And also the weather incidents of flooding and storms and hurricanes and whatnot are coming, well, faster and faster and all over the world. So how do we make sure that this smart grid, this new energy system, that is really not just only smart and efficient, but also resilient? Ronnie?
I think we have seen it just a couple of weeks ago in Jamaica, for instance, where in response to a hurricane, the household that had solar PV on their rooftop were the ones who had electricity service directly and the quickest. We have also seen the same resilience in conflict areas like in Ukraine. And I think this is already one strength renewable energy does bring to resilience. First is an independence of fuel imports. That's the first part. But then also the decentralized nature that really allows to provide energy services to communities and citizens locally. And I think this is very clearly one part is really not seeing, and sometimes we still see that policymakers or also some TSOs see that the decentralization brings a messiness that is difficult to handle, but actually it brings exactly the resilience and many, many opportunities. The other part around resilience, and I think is really, obviously there are technical questions to it. It is about enough grids, it's about enough flexibility at the decentralization, but it is also about the people and the stakeholders. What we clearly see is you need to involve citizens in the planning processes. Renewable energy allows citizens to basically be owner of their resilient solution because they can own this, the cities can own it, and we see that resilience is sustainable when citizens are owner of the resilient solution. So that's clearly renewables for resilience is at the heart of any energy system.
Wilmar, Ronnie, Rene, would you like to add?
Yeah, I will say it is necessary like to reform the standards for building the infrastructure, which is necessary now because the infrastructure is going to be exposed to very aggressive climate events. So that will be like an important part. And the other part is our power system, our energy system is conditioned by a regulation that was designed for a centralized system. And with this climate event, any event in any specific part of the system could create cascade effects affecting the whole power system. So it is necessary to create some kind of incentive for distributed generation, for flexibility, for storage, in order to try to mitigate the impact of those climate events into the power system.
That's okay. I know what I'm going to ask you anyway. So this is a final question to all of you. So in terms of I have wonderful assistants here. So what message would each one of you like to send to the leaders here at the COP? Because this is a platform that many leaders actually watch. So Rene, what would you like to send us off with here?
My message would be to deliver on the commitments that the leaders have made in the past. We heard how important electrification is, especially for the transport system. also for the building system, and we don't see much progress on electrification. And I think one of the main reasons for this is that there's no clear signal from the political leaders that electrification, especially of the transport sector and also the building sector, is the key path towards climate neutrality. And we need this clarity. We need clear deliverance on the commitments.
Thank you, René. Vilmar.
Yeah, I will say, and my message it will be that the energy transition is a very important part to achieve the climate goals. And it's not only deploying renewables, but it's also building smart grids and pushing for electrification, which is key for moving forward for the transition. And that will be my message. And this is not only like a climate issue, it's a way to improve the economic conditions and the growth in the global south in order to create jobs and improve the living conditions of people.
Thank you very much, Ronnie.
I would also echo very much on really delivering on the commitments that have already been done, which is phasing out fossil fuel, committing to renewable energy deployment, committing to basic grid infrastructure and storage, committing to energy corridors, but also really linking this in a strategic way to prosperity, to fairness, and to strong and resilient societies. And here, I think from Rent on one side, very clearly a message that renewable energy is not only an answer to mitigate CO2 emissions, but to really build climate resilience, economic resilience, and societal resilience in a renewable-based economy.
Thank you, Ronnie. Petra, you get the last say here.
Yeah, I think there are two main areas in this COP where action is needed, and that is the ambition in reducing emissions. We know that the current state is not adequate. The new plans that have been submitted, they don't add up to what is needed. So we need to, from this COP, we need to see the signals for the years ahead, how those targets can be improved, and more especially how the implementation of those targets will take place to overachieve what has been promised so far. The other side is, of course, the means to do so. There are many countries who would like to do this, but who don't have the means. And there are, on their other side, a lot of countries that have resources that they can and should share, and those signals also need to come from here.
Well, thank you very much indeed for sharing your perspectives, and really best of luck with your important work here in Berlin. It's been a hectic week, I'm sure. It's the last day of the first week. And I hope you get some rest tomorrow. It's not easy to rest when you're in the middle of this, but just recharge your batteries, if I may use that word in these conditions. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
To pre-record, and it's a pre-record from an energy transition webinar that was recorded ahead of a COP, and it's by our partner AEE, the Association of Energy Engineers. So Joy.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar that is a partnership between the Association of Energy Engineers, otherwise known as AEE, and We Don't Have Time, to discuss some opportunities to drive energy and climate innovation ahead of COP30 that's coming up next month in Brazil.
The vision of AEE is to lead the global energy community to provide solutions for an efficient, an affordable, a reliable, and a sustainable energy future.
We are experiencing, after about 20 years of flat energy growth, increased energy demand, in particular in the power sector. So we are in a new paradigm now, and conversations about how to serve those needs and provide energy services to people is critical, and it's different than it was even just a few short years ago. And I think another question that we have, obviously, as this energy reality is shifting for us, and we are in a mode where we need to expand our energy services faster and also keep affordably front of mind, there is a question about what is the direction of travel for investors when it comes to energy investment. We've always taken the view that we need the broadest portfolio of energy resources, and sustainability as well as affordability and reliability and security need to come together when those decisions are made about what types of technologies and resources a community, a business, or a household might choose to use. But we are seeing strong demand from consumers and the economy across the board for the most modern, affordable, and clean energy resources we can get. And we want to take that message to the world. And the last part is something that we spend most of our time focused on at the COPs. It's really about what are the policy frameworks that will allow the private sector to invest quickly and do it in a manner that will provide the long-term certainty that is required for the types of investments that we're talking about, which in many cases are long-lived, decades-long investments, which also take, in some cases, 5 to 10 years to consider, plan, execute on. So these are long-lived, and we need to have clear and stable policies to underpin those investments. So for COP30, there is a big focus on a number of issues, and adaptation is clearly one of them. How to protect our natural resources is another. But we're, in addition to focusing on how our technologies, products, and services can address those issues, we are looking at the energy transition goals that were adopted at 2 COPs previous to us in Dubai. And they focus on the areas of energy efficiency, doubling the rate of energy efficiency improvements by 2030. They focus on renewable energy deployment goals. More recently, last year in Baku, we added grid and storage. So for us, this is critical because we need to focus on what the solutions are that will help us achieve our goals. And by having these very clear and articulated across all countries will help them as they're putting together their national strategies on energy.
This particular relationship with Al Gore has blossomed into something that allows me to share you some information today that very few people in the world have. When Al Gore was at our conference 2 years ago, he presented a new model. It had been around for a little bit, but basically they were tracking 600 million sources of carbon emissions. And I think that's great, and that illustrates the problem quite clearly. And they're using AI and a bunch of really cool technology. If you haven't looked at the TED Talks, you might go do that just to understand the rigor behind it, but it's pretty impressive. And even if they're only 80 or 90% accurate, it's nice to get a third-party view of what's going on this planet, right? Versus hearing it from some company that may be a polluter, right? So there's kind of a little bit of a bias there. But I think even more exciting what was announced the last couple months is they came out with this thing called plumes, where it's not just about the CO2, but they're actually showing animations of where the pollution is going. And you can see it right here. This is Detroit, and you can kind of see how, and this is all available right now, by the way, but you can see in almost real time, a typical day, where the pollution is going. And I think this is really important because I've struggled for a long time getting people to care about energy efficiency, getting people to care about things. And COP is important, all that stuff. But when it comes down to it, whether you're paying your bills this month, the economy usually takes precedent. But I think seeing that you might be blanketed by pollution from another place, maybe a nearby town, nearby industry, might really get your attention. Because I think cancer, the ability to have PM10, PM2.5, other parts of pollution that actually has been shown quite conclusively. My wife is a medical doctor, so I can kind of back this up also. That stuff causes cancer. And if you're knowing that you're being, getting blanketed by pollution, I think you might actually care. This has a more direct and immediate impact on a human's lifespan. And that's kind of the difference, right? Climate change might impact my kids or my grandkids and so on. But cancer affects me, and it'll affect people. And I think that's a real good motivator. So I'm actually quite excited about this thing. It's already had a bigger impact than I could have imagined. I think communities will be more inclined to take action or demand action from political people. And I think this will motivate emission reduction projects because it's all kind of linked, the carbon and the pollution, et cetera. And what's neat about some of these tools, just going back to Climate Trace, is you can kind of see a pretty good map of the world in, like I say, real time. And you can even sort by different types of industries, whether it's power, agriculture, et cetera. And I'll just give you an example of how detailed this is. You can go to India, you can go to Europe, you can go to the United States, and you can drill down into specific locations and even identify, see these purple dots down here? Those are all like individual factories that have emissions, okay, that are being tracked. And you can see the trend for multiple years.
We certainly have a shortage in the workforce. You know, if we couple with that the pending retirement wave, almost 35% of the respondents plan to retire within the next 10 years. And in North America, we're facing a really immediate challenge as about 25% of the workforce plans to retire within the next 5 years. So we have a retiring workforce, we already have a shortage, we have a growing workforce. One of our partners, the Energy Efficiency Movement, released a report, an industrial report, Efficiency Now, earlier this year, and they reported that 48% of the respondents indicated that a skilled worker shortage was hindering energy efficiency implementations. So we see we currently have a shortage. When we look at the energy efficiency workforce, according to IEA and their multiple benefits of energy efficiency report, we have about 10 million people in the energy efficiency jobs globally, which is about 15% of all energy-related jobs. And that number is expected to increase by 5 million by 2030. So certainly with the growth of demand for electricity and energy, with the retirement, with just a shortage of workers, we have a huge opportunity to develop the workforce. So how do we scale the workforce? It would seem to be easy, but I would say it's certainly a challenge, but an opportunity for us. You know, if you ask a real estate agent, what's the most important thing with buying a home is location, location, location. I would say when we talk about scaling a workforce, the most important thing is training, training, training. We certainly need to train more and more people. We need funding to facilitate much of that training. And then we also need to ensure confirmation of competencies, knowledge, skills, and abilities so that when a workforce is trained and they're going to be hired to do the work and do the projects, there needs to be some confidence that they have the competencies in order to perform the work. So how do we address training in the workforce? I think one of the first things we have to do is we have to, everyone here, our network, we have to promote energy efficiency and energy efficiency careers. These are good paying jobs that make a difference and make an impact and have great career opportunities. So why would someone not want to be involved with energy efficiency? Good pay, make an impact with health, whether it's climate, whether it's carbon, climate change, and certainly financial impact. So we need to promote energy efficiency careers.
I will go back to the numbers. By 2030, apparently, we will need 6.3 to 6.7 trillion annually to decarbonize. These are huge numbers. I always have a hard time to figure them out. Of that, 2.4 trillion must reach emerging and developing countries. In 2023, we reached 1.3 trillion. So early 2024 data suggests that we surpassed 2 trillions, which means we are 1/3 of the way. The problem, again, is not the absence of capital. I think it's the absence of bankable projects and financial frameworks that can challenge it. So, as I said, more than fighting on numbers, I think we have to create the capacity in every country to design, structure, and de-risk investment-ready climate projects, which means expanding technical assistance, empowering local institutions, and integrating climate expertise into national development banks and private banks as well. And then it means to align financial regulation so that the cost of capital reflects real country risk. And here, this is something that I really notice working with Sustainable Energy for All on projects on the ground and on countries that are not so easy. developing nations are paying up to 2 or 3 times more interest rates of the advanced economies for the same technologies. And many times this is not their fault, meaning there is not, after the Lehman Brothers crash in 2008, the private sector banking regulations have been tightened up, but at the same time, a lot of the risking tools that are available from multilateral development banks, for example, are not taken into account from private banks when they calculate the cost of capital.
I've been involved in this process since Kyoto, and it's been a struggle to get any recognition of practical implementation type approaches. I mean, we have Article 6 emissions trading, and that I would argue is a practical market, that is a practical pathway, but we've never really articulated technologies in this way and not excluding, like this is, yes, there is the transition, but this is really kind of a menu of options for all countries to refer to as they're thinking about their climate plans. And then they're setting, some quantitative goals for it. To not just think about energy efficiency, think about this kind of a mindset, doubling the global rate of energy efficiency in the near term as your North Star, when you think about how energy efficiency can help your economy.
Are we sometimes in danger of making renewable energy too cheap?
Can renewable energy be too cheap? Well, if it's cheap, utilities should start using it more frequently as a fuel source. That's a logical way for utilities to stay in the game and not be displaced by everyone cutting their cords when they're frustrated with high utility prices.
It's great that we have the focus on energy efficiency. For we've been doing this almost 50 years, and it really wasn't a part of the climate discussion, and now I think it is, and it's great that starting at COP28 we had the UAE consensus, and so now we have a real focus on doubling the rate of energy efficiency.
The politics come and go, but climate change doesn't, and also the creativity. I think that's the other thing that gives me great hope. And maybe I don't like the word hope. It gives me a great sense that we can do this, right? Because I think the creativity is undiminished in terms of what can actually be achieved on our planet. And AI, sensibly managed, could really give us another window through which we can walk to that clean energy and climate safe future.
We have the solutions to turn this around. Now, implementation and action is also a solution or part of it, right? But we're getting there, and we're pushing for it together with our partners.
Certainly, technology is changing, the world's changing, solutions, and we do a lot to keep our members updated. Ian facilitates 3 or 4 webinars a month. I know earlier this week we did one on heat pumps, a series of that, had over 600 people. So we're doing continual education and training for our members. Eric leads our CEM program. This year we added decarbonization and greenhouse gas accounting. Next year, I think we'll be adding AI to the CEM. Is that correct? And so we need to stay current with what we're doing and what we're teaching so that the engineers have the latest and the greatest solutions and technologies, along with all the solutions that are proven and have not really changed for really decades.
I think every single person on this planet needs to be educated and re-educated about climate change. We are dedicated as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to embrace this education issue.
We can look into the eyes of our children, our grandchildren, and we can finally tell them that we have joined hands to bequeath a more habitable world.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
State Congress voted to ban abortion. Alternate universe located.
Global temperatures rise.
The effects on social media on Generation Z.
To avoid catastrophe, rising sea levels, and dying coral reefs, the epicenter of a global pandemic.
No exception for rape or incest.
I'm here with Benoit Bassin, CEO and Chairman of Saint-Gobain. And it's fascinating. You're hosting 2 events here at the COP, and you're also launching your action paper on sustainable construction. This is really some excellent work you're doing here at the COP. So what is the key messages you want to convey here at the COP when it comes to sustainable construction?
It is basically to say that sustainable construction not only is the solution for the climate, but it's also a big real-world opportunity for the planet, but also for the well-being of the people. So we have identified in the action paper 6 transformative issues that will move the construction sector towards even more sustainability. It's about defining a common framework. It's also about strengthening collaboration, embedding resilience and adaptation, making sure also that we have tailored solutions for emerging markets, measuring also the economic prosperity that we can bring with sustainable construction, and finally also change the perception that moving from compliance to something that people will desire. So altogether moving the value chain towards better construction, sustainable construction.
You've called sustainable construction one of the most important levers to really get climate action on the road here. So what concrete innovations and also partnerships would show the way here that we need to really push for?
The true call for action is a deep collaboration, because not one single company can cover all this. We need to align all the stakeholders. So the true call for action is deeper, faster collaboration from building owners, financiers, insurers, policymakers, architects, building materials providers. So it's a call for deeper collaboration so that we can scale and speed up the implementation. It's a COP about execution and implementation. That's the action paper that we want to release and, of course, measure.
Thank you very much. And also Brazil and Latin America more broadly is a major focus here, of course, for COP since we are here. And how is Saint-Gobain supporting local resilience and decarbonization in this region?
We are actually big in Brazil. We will celebrate in a few years 90 years of presence. So we have 12,000 employees. Even in Pará state, we have 5 plants. So we are local for local. It's very important because you don't build in Brazil, in the north of Brazil, like in the south of France or in Vietnam. So this is the way we act together within Saint-Gobain, is local presence and, of course, local partnerships with all the stakeholders. In Brazil specifically, we have low carbon offer of glass, for instance. We have been moving fast also on circular economy, so not only low carbon, but also recycled materials. So multiple initiatives with the leadership of our Brazilian teams and a great presence for decades in Brazil.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Benoit Bassin. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think every single person on this planet needs to be educated and re-educated about climate change. We are dedicated as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to embrace this education issue.
We can look into the eyes of our children, our grandchildren, and we can finally say, tell them that we have joined hands to bequeath a more habitable world.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
State Congress voted to ban abortion. Alternate universe located.
Global temperatures rise.
The execs on social media on Generation Z.
To avoid catastrophe, rising sea levels, and dying coral reefs, the epicenter of a global pandemic.
No exception for rape or incest.
Great. So we've got another wonderful guest with us here at COP30, here in wonderful Belém. It's the Commissioner of Energy and Housing, Dan Jørgensen. Now, I'm British, right? So we always make a mess of these. You do it.
Well, Jørgensen.
Jørgensen.
But most people say Jørgensen.
They say Jørgensen, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
It's really tricky. Okay, it's not just me then, it's others too. You just arrived just recently here, I think, at the COP. First impressions?
So first and foremost, I'm very happy to see that multilateralism is still alive. Was it Mark Twain who said that the rumors of my death is greatly exaggerated?
Yeah, it was not Tom Sawyer, but Mark Twain.
Yeah, Mark Twain, right? So this is, of course, way too serious a topic to joke about, but nonetheless, it's really positive to see that there's an atmosphere of willingness to act. There's a sense of urgency. We know that climate change is here. It's not something that might happen in the future. It's something that's a very real, present thing that has consequences all over the world. And we need to do more to fight it.
So I also get the feeling that this might be a departure from the baby steps since Paris. And I think it's very interesting the Brazilian government wants this, people to come up with clear plans of how they're going to phase down fossil fuels. So fingers crossed for next week. We're here in a sense in part because we're doing a 6-part series. We've had several episodes already, focusing on energy efficiency in the European Union. And it kind of grew out of the International Energy Agency conference that was some months ago, because we did a show we wanted the media there for that. And we did a little show where we talked about an amazing industrial heat pump that's been developed under Horizon project, which can scale water from -32 up to like 250 degrees centigrade in seconds, which might decarbonize like 20% of European industry. So one of your colleagues, or a colleague in the Energy Directorate, Rosalinda van der Vlies, said, why can't we do more about what we're doing in Europe and all these wonderful ideas from Horizon and Life projects? Anyway, so this is how, and so later after you, we will be doing more, delving more into that again. But tell me, I mean, the EU, is it on track, do you think, with this global goal of doubling energy efficiency and tripling renewables by 2030?
So in the European Union, we are indeed on track with regards to our renewable energy targets. We will deploy 89 gigawatts of new renewable energy this year. Last year it was 78. That was a record. This year will be a record. Next year we'll break that record again. So that's the good news. The bad news is that on energy efficiency, we are actually not on track. We need to deliver more than we're doing now. And in a way, it's quite strange because investments in energy efficiency are investments that pay back very fast. So in average, for a private home, if you invest in better isolation, a new heat source, new windows, stuff like that, it will bring down your bills in a way and in a speed that makes sure that you get your investments back in average between 3 and 5 years. And after that, it's just money for you, basically, right? And in industry, it's a little bit longer than that, but it's still 5 to 7 years. So it's just good business to do it. So why doesn't it happen? Well, I think we need to be better at focusing on the advantages. I think we need to be better at making sure that the financial instruments are actually there in the member states. We need to work with the financial sector. They need to offer loan and mortgages that take this into account. And then, of course, we need to make sure that the rules and regulations, sounds a bit boring and bureaucratic, but it needs to be in place.
Absolutely. Sometimes you've got the big idea at the top, you know, it comes from a UN, say, climate conference, then it devolves down to national level, as it were, or in the case of the European Union, 20 plus countries, right? And then it goes through cities and down to communities, and somewhere on that cascade, things can get lost or get muddied or a bit confused, yeah? So it is bigger than people think, trying to translate these brand new ideas down into the ground.
Yeah, you're totally right. I will say, though, that sometimes it's actually the other way around, because sometimes there's a small company somewhere getting an idea, creating a new project, And then all of a sudden, we have new possibilities that then translates into policies. So I'll give you an example. In the 1970s in Denmark, a young man, 19 years old, because of the oil crisis, he decided to try and see if he could create an energy source for his family. He was 19. He didn't have a formal education or anything like that. And he built what was the first wind turbine in Denmark that is today the prototype for 80% of all wind turbines on the planet.
Wow.
Because he sold that blueprint to a small company at that time that is now Vestas, the biggest wind turbine company in the world. So I like to tell that story because it shows us that sometimes it takes a vision and the imaginative brain of one or two or a small group of people to make something start up. And then it takes, of course, politicians and investments and all of that to make it grow. But it's up to us as policymakers to find those ideas, to find those solutions and support them.
And to short-circuit the difference between the idea and the realization in the marketplace. Because, I mean, with wind and solar, I mean, it was happening a little bit in the 1990s, right? But it took a hell of a long time to get to the point at which now it's cheaper than chips, right? And
yeah, so that's true. I mean, most of the technologies that we today consider the cheapest and the best and the easiest to use, so solar, for instance, wind, it didn't used to be like that. And when the technology is new, you need to subsidize it and you need to help it. And people will say, well, subsidize it. How can we use taxpayers' money for that? Well, remember, we've subsidized the fossil fuel for decades and decades. So now it's only fair that we also subsidize what will replace the fossil fuels. And by the way, if we don't do it, the cost will be quite detrimental for all of us.
So I watched your speech from the International Energy Agency meeting in Brussels. This was it the 10th conference, I think, on energy efficiency or something?
Yeah, I know the date. It was the 12th of June because it was at my 50th birthday.
Ah, your 50th. Well, you're much younger than me. Oh, good, lucky man. Yeah, it was all 7 days then after World Environment Day, which
That's
is on the 5th of June. And you were talking about this whole issue of energy efficiency as being a security issue. Is it still a security issue?
Very much so. I mean, in the European Union, we see it most obvious, of course, with the example of Russia. So when the war broke out and the full-scale invasion started in 22, we in Europe got 45% of our gas from Russia. So we were basically dependent on an enemy. That's bad in many ways. Putin could have decided to close the taps and we would have gone into an economic recession. On the other hand, he didn't, so we continued to buy Russian gas, and that meant that we indirectly helped finance his war. None of that is, of course, something that we can live with. It's not sustainable in any sense of the word. So since then, we've been working hard to get rid of this dependency, and I'm happy to say that in a few weeks, we will make the final compromise between the European Parliament and the member states so that we can finally get rid of the last imports of Russian energy. But apart from that, so that's the most hardcore part of the equation, you could say. Apart from that, on a more overall level, obviously it's not sustainable to be dependent on importing energy. Because if you don't have energy security, you don't have security. And this means that we need to diversify whoever it is that we buy energy from. But the best strategy really is to create your own energy. And that's why renewables is at the core and the center of what we do. But energy efficiency also, because the first energy source that we should really be looking to is not really an energy source, it's energy efficiency. Because if we can use less energy, we save money, we save emissions, and we become independent.
I'm sure you've got a lot more on your plate than thinking about these European Union, European Commission supported Horizon and Life projects. But there are a lot of them out there, some with some really weird names. I don't know who makes them up in the acronyms up in the Commission, but they're unbelievably complicated. But they deserve a medal for it, actually. And there is not an insignificant amount of investment going in them. They seem often like pilots or test beds in different cities, different areas for ideas. and hopefully after that they get scaled up and become just normal across the European Union. But just say a little bit about them. They are an important part of the strategy, yeah?
That's extremely important. I mean, remember, all of the technologies that we now consider mainstream didn't used to be that. They used to be small, insignificant, maybe even a crazy idea. And then all of a sudden we see that the potential is there and we bring it up in scale and down in price. And we need pilot projects for us to do that. And of course, we also need to acknowledge that sometimes we will support something with European funding and it'll turn out to become nothing. That, okay, that wasn't the right horse to bet on. But then when we support a lot of different projects, the chances are that we will actually then end up supporting what will then be the solution of the future.
Good. So I've enjoyed finding out about them, and on this series we are having some really good examples of things that are both practical and very innovative as well. So that. Last question. You're a busy chap. You're at the COP.